For today, I'd like to welcome Helen McCrarren here to Monaghan today. Thank you very much. Helen, I just picked out one particular part of the presentation that she's going to make that certainly interests me as an employer, and that she's going to look at stress on the employer and employee relationship, and obviously facilitating that and how business can get on. So, Helen, we leave the floor to you.
Okay, well, thank you all. It's a long day to stay going at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I'm going to talk about managing stress Japanese style. As employers, we're our best at it. You know, if we're in good nick, our business will probably be in good nick. I mean, the different types of stresses you have in life, you have your personal stress that you bring to your business, you have whatever's going on with your employees can create a lot of stress, and then you have the things involved in the business itself create a lot of stress. So, we have to look at how does stress affect our performance, right? So if we have a small amount of stress, we can't really get that excited, can we? If we have the right amount of stress, we can do really, really well. And if we have too much stress, we don't get anywhere. Would people agree with that?
Yeah.
The right amount of stress and you're just buzzing, right? So the thing about it is that whenever we have to make a change in our life, we tend to get stressed. Would people agree with that? You know, you start New Year's Day and you're going to have all these resolutions and you're going to do the devil and all, and you start off and you're running and running and running, and then you're exhausted by the second week in January and everybody disappears out of the gym. Are you all familiar with that? I suppose I'm just realising I haven't defined stress. Like, what is stress as such? Huh? Stress is everything falling apart. But what is stress like? Somebody described it, I think, I was at Noel's talk there, he's used the word pressure. Like, what do we mean when we talk about stress? Well, I'm going to define stress, because I've only 20 minutes, I'm going to make it very simple. I'm going to look at the part of stress that says, I can't cope. This is just too much for me. So I'm really focusing on stress on this side of the diagram. So, I can't cope. I feel overwhelmed. And you know, when you feel overwhelmed and you can't cope, you usually do the opposite of what you should be doing. So instead of taking really good care of yourself, you take really bad care of yourself. Instead of doing things that would make you feel good and productive, because stress overwhelms you so much, you sort of lie in bed and don't do anything. Would you be familiar with that pattern where the bigger the stress is, the less productive? Because basically what happens is, the more stressed we are, the less creative we are. Because with stress activates the fight and flight response, so you tend to run away. So all the energy is in your muscles for a quick getaway, so there's no blood going to your brain. So it's very hard to come up with creative solutions. So have any of you heard of the word Kaizen? It's a Japanese word for change. Sorry, it's a Japanese word. It has two parts to it. Kai means change and Zen means good, right? So the Kaizen way of doing things is to think about what is the smallest improvement that I could take. What is the smallest step that I could take right now? So during the Second World War in America, they had to be really, really productive. So they got everybody involved and they looked at how the thing was done in the business. So what you would do is you would look at your business and you would literally catalogue every single step. What are all the component parts that make up your business? They would get everybody involved, and then they would say, what is the smallest step that I could take that would lead to more efficiency? You're looking for a tiny step. But how that relates to change is, if I decide on a small change, I'm not going to feel stressed about it. It's not going to, you know, it's not going to, you're increasing the likelihood that I'm going to do it. Does that make sense? Right? So you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you you need to lose a stone, get out there and start running. And you're totally overwhelmed and you're thinking, what can I do? How can I start? Or say you have to go in and you have something really important to do at a meeting, you have to go in or you say you have to cold call somebody and you hate that, of having to ring someone, you hate networking, you hate having anything to do like that. It really just activates this fear response and you can't get going. So what you do, the Kaizen way would be you identify the smallest step. Now the step should be that small that you are guaranteed to succeed. Does that make sense? So the very first step for cold calling might be I'm going to imagine, for 30 seconds every day, I'm going to imagine myself making the call. Is there anyone who couldn't do that? So after a week you're thinking, yeah, maybe I could do a minute. And the next thing, it's really baby steps. And the next thing, you're doing the whole thing. Alright? I hate PowerPoint. So this is my PowerPoint. This is your baby step. You see the wee baby climbing up the stairs? They're going to get to the teddy bear in the top. So don't underestimate the value of small steps. A hostess on an American airline discovered, she just commented one day on the fact that nobody ate the olives on the moon, right? So the American company discovered they were charged according to the amount of products they had on the menu. So they just stopped getting the olives and they saved hundreds of thousands just from that one simple step. So the Kaizen way is to think of and ask yourself the small questions. What's the smallest thing I could do? Because the brain loves small questions. If you ask yourself, how come I can't solve this problem? You're not going to get any type of an answer. But if you ask yourself every single morning for a week, what's the smallest step I could take to improve my business? You're more likely to come up with a creative answer. And then take small actions. As I say, if you go back to cold call on a client, somebody might say, well, start and just call one person every day. But that might be too much for you. So the smallest action you might take would be to sit with the telephone in your hand and imagine calling somebody every day for a week. And you build your way up. And solve small problems, right? So if you're millions of pounds in debt at this stage and you think, what's the point? Nothing I'm going to do is going to make any difference. The thing about it is you can start with a small step. Maybe you can tidy your desk. Maybe you can actually create a sense of order. If you take any action, it satisfies the brain. It says, well, you're doing something and you feel better about yourself. And as you feel better about yourself, you're more likely to see a solution coming forward. Does that make sense to people? Mm-hmm. If you take any action, so even though you might say, well, what does cleaning my desk got to do with it? It'll increase your self-esteem, you'll feel better, you'll feel you're taking action. And when you're involved in something like that, maybe the next step will appear. Is that okay? So that's the first thing, is to manage change in the Kaizen way. And what they found is companies that need to make radical changes, if they come in and get the employees involved and get them to engage in a small change, they're more receptive to a big change than if they just come in and take the big change in all at once. And the other thing is to give yourself small rewards. And you know the way we often see people, or you go into the bank or you go into somewhere and they have these suggestion boxes, right? Well, what they discovered was to make them every month and to give a reward. But the reward needs to be small. Because we don't want a big reward, because we think if we have a big reward we have to do something big to earn it. But it could be something like giving you a gold pen, or a silver pen, or it could be 2 cinema tickets, something really small. Now they've really embraced this in Japan, and it's really active in 90% of their companies over there. And employees contribute, they look at their suggestions, they implement them, they reward them, and they're making progress. I mean, I think Toyota is one of the top whatever companies. So, any questions on that? I think I forgot I only had 20 minutes, so I have loads of stuff up here. Okay? So the next thing we're going to look at is called Morita therapy, right? It's based on Dr. Morita. So, he looked at people that were depressed and people that were anxious. And he came up with a four-point plan for getting rid of the anxiety and getting rid of fear. And the first one was, he reckoned that people didn't realise if you just sit with your fear and accept it, it will pass of its own accord, right? If you accept it, not if you fight against it. So if I'm sitting here feeling anxious and I'm saying, but I shouldn't be anxious, I have a good life and everything's going well and I shouldn't be feeling like this. Well, that's not acceptance, is it? You're fighting it, and by fighting the way you feel, you're actually making the connection stronger. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Where if you just say, right, okay, I don't like this feeling of anxiety, I don't like this feeling of pressure, I don't like this feeling of stress, but I'm acknowledging that that's where I am right now. Well, then you've taken a lot of the power away from it. Okay, so the first thing he did with people that were depressed, he took them, and anxious, he took them out of the community, brought them into hospital, and he left them in a room, isolated on their own for a week, until they began to see that no matter how hard you would try to hold on to a feeling of anxiety, you can't. It'll actually pass on its own in its own good time. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. The other mistake he noticed that people made was to think that, oh, she's up there doing this talk and she's not nervous. Well, you've no idea whether I'm nervous or not, right? So he felt people have a lot of misperceptions. That this misperception, I shouldn't be anxious, I shouldn't be upset. But his idea is that you recognize you're anxious and you recognize you're upset and you do it anyway. So it's a bit like feel the fear and do it anyway. But what he does is he concentrates what's within our control. Are our thoughts within our control? Are they?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Can we stop a thought from arising?
Control it.
But can you stop it from arising?
No, but you can just make it leave it where it is. You don't have to make it any
Yeah.
bigger.
But we can't actually stop it arising, can we?
No, I don't think you can
Like
stop
if
it.
you think somebody murdered someone, you're like, no, it didn't, and then
Yeah.
keeps creeping up, saying, like, but I still think he's guilty, or that's
Yeah.
over.
But I'm going to do something, so just determine now, this time I'm going to make 10 phone calls. And I'm going to be really positive and I'm going to say, oh, you will not be able to stop that voice that says, but you won't. You'll never get there. Stop. Now, cognitive therapy, I know, invests a lot of time in teaching us to think positive. But Dr. Morita looks at it a bit differently. He would say, right, that's a thought. Can we stop? Can we control our feelings?
Yeah.
Can we stop sadness? You know, if you feel a sudden burst of sadness, can you control whether it arises or not?
You can't control it away, you can stop it.
Right. So, can we control our behaviour? Have I control over whether I sit down or stand up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, which of those three have I more control over? My thoughts, my feelings, or my actions?
It's the same amount of control over it all.
Do you think?
Yeah.
I wouldn't agree, right? But we're all free to, I'm just presenting information. So Dr. Morita's view was, we don't have control over our thoughts, we can't stop them from arising, we can't stop our emotions from coming up, but at all times, we have control over our behaviour. Okay? So you concentrate on what you have control over. So even though I'm absolutely petrified of making these phone calls, I can still put my hand up and pick up my phone. I can still open my mouth and talk. I might feel like I can't, but in actual fact I can. I have full control over my behaviour. But here in the West, what we've tried to do is change our thoughts and change our emotions and hope that our behaviour will change as a result of changing our thoughts and our emotions. But he starts from the other point of view. He starts with what you actually do. So it's called the psychology of action. You're all looking a bit mesmerised now, right? So I'm just looking at attention. How am I feeling? A lot of us get caught up with how am I feeling? Am I feeling like making this cold call? Am I feeling like I'm anxious? Am I feeling like I'm upset? And the more you put your attention on something, the more it grows. So the more I look inside to see, am I anxious? I have all this negative self-talk. What are you doing? Are you growing it? So what Morita therapy does is it trains you to take your attention from what's going on in here to actually what's going on outside, right? So if I think about how anxious am I, I'm probably even going to get more anxious. But if I actually concentrate on the movement of my hand, so I have to move my hand across there to pick up my phone, right? So I take my attention on to this and it actually breaks the cycle of what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. Would any of you do that? 5 minutes, right? So I know people think, you go out for a run, you feel fantastic because you manage to get up off the chair and get your feet going. You actually feel fantastic. So what he'd say is, The confidence and all that comes as a result of taking action, not the other way around. Does that make sense? So by taking action, you improve your confidence rather than waiting until you're confident to take action. Okay? So in other words, lead with the body. So all these feelings of I'm not good enough and I'm anxious, you just take them with you. You coexist with these uncomfortable feelings and you take them with you. Okay? Right? So on 3 minutes I'm going to talk about Nikon. This is the third Japanese tool for managing stress, right? So I've stressed you all out by giving you too much information, right? So Nikon Ishimo Yoko, something or other is the name of the Japanese. He was a Japanese businessman who was very successful in business, but he was very much into Buddhism and into self-reflection, right? So he realized that not everybody could go into a cave and sort of meditate and do all of these things. So what Nikon is designed to do is to get you to look at yourself in relation to the world, okay? So a lot of time I'm very busy thinking, well, he did that to me and that employee is, you know, they're always slacking off early and this other employee, they're not pulling their weight and they're really annoying my head, right? But what self-reflection does and what this particular tool is designed to do is to get you to look at your place in all of this, right? So when I started doing Nikon, I had this sudden epiphany, you know, that my poor secretary could never get anything done on time because I like to do things at the last minute. I would think about a talk until 10 minutes before I want to do it, and then I expect someone to deliver my presentation done. But obviously I wouldn't give them enough time. So what I realised was how much trouble I was causing my secretary. And I decided, well, you know what, I know what I'm like. So guess what, 3 weeks in advance I'll book and I'll say, the last 3 hours on Friday afternoon I need a talk typed up. I know I won't have it with you until lunchtime, but you know you'll get it done in 3 hours. So she knows it's going to happen and that works for both of us. Does that make sense? So Nikon really looks at gratitude. So what have I received from? So what have we received from the Border Bizcamp today? Think of some of the things we've received.
Ice cream.
Ice cream. Pizza. Wonderful speakers. A nice place to spend the day. That's just a few. So what have we given to the Border Bizcamp?
Our presents. Our presents.
Our presents. What else have we given?
Our ears. Our ears.
Our ears.
Our input.
Our input. So have we got more from the Bizcamp or have we given more to it?
We got more from it.
We have got more from it. Okay? But I think we'd all agree with that.
Yeah.
We've got more than we've given. In general in life, we get a lot more than we've given. Especially if we're looking that way. So, and what troubles or difficulties have I caused the Border Bizcamp today? That gives us an idea of how we feel in relation to other people. So what difficulties or problems have we caused? I'll run over time now and that'll be one problem.
You're all right.
But just think about it. You know, maybe I took somebody else's parking spot. Maybe I gave out about some of the speakers. Maybe I complained about the pizza. Maybe I wanted a different sort of ice cream. Does that make sense? So what you're looking at with Nikon in relation to your business is, number one, you're looking at, we'll just say an employee. What is this employee giving me? And looking at the good parts. You know, what have I given to the employee? Well, maybe I've given them employment, I've given them a regular pay packet. But then what troubles and difficulties have I caused this person? So maybe I'm constantly finding fault with them so that they're losing their self-belief. You know, maybe I have a part to play in the difficulties that are going on here. So, and I guarantee you, if you do that, if you have enough guts to do that for a week, either with your family or with your business, you'll be mesmerised at what you find at the end of it. And it's a very, I can tell you from practical experience, it's a very humbling experience. You suddenly realise, gosh, I do cause people quite a lot of bother. Because our attention is always on the trouble that other people cause us, isn't it? We never really think about what trouble am I causing this person. So that's just an introduction to the Japanese way of looking at things. So I hope you found something useful in it. Okay?
I think I'll start it with the family first. Have anyone got any questions?
I just wondered if we could get some further information on do you have a website?
I am in the middle of rebranding myself, right? So actually I'll give you those questions and my information is on the end of it. But just in terms of the Todo Institute is where I did a lot of my training. They do a lot of online courses which are very good. No, that was just, did you look at the stress questionnaire? Yeah. Were any of you brave enough to stand where you were? Anybody under 5? I was at 5. You were at 5, very good. 5 or 6 is about where we want to be. You know, if you're at 1 or at 10. Yeah. But I do think the Japanese have a different way of looking at things, and there's a whole component there about getting things done that we didn't get around to.
Yeah, apologies on that. And can but stress is good as well.
Stress is good, that's what I'm saying. If you look at the stress diagram, you know, if you're in the middle, that's optimum stress.
Blank sheets
You know, that's where we want to be. And everybody's individual, so the trick is for me to work out at what level am I best working at. And to try and have that amount of stress in my life. And you can have a bit of variety, but it's to make sure, I think what happens in the West here is we adapt to stress. So you have a hectic schedule and you get used to it. And then you add another bit, and then you add another bit, and then you add another bit. And we don't even realise we're getting burned out because we've adapted. We've adapted to it in the first place. And I think that's the biggest mistake we make. So it's to look at, what do I need to do to be here? So is that okay? Any comments or?
We get that candle accent idea.
Oh, it has really.
Really want to do that now. That's what I take out the whole day. I think it's really very good idea in the family and in your workplace and everything to look and see instead of seeing what problems you're getting from other people, what problems you causing people.
Yeah.
It'd be very humbling.
Very humbling. I remember realising I was giving my son a hard time without realising it. And sort of realising I was looking at what he wasn't doing instead of actually noticing what he was doing. But you'd be amazed in all the little ways you suddenly think like, gosh, I shouldn't be doing this or I shouldn't be doing that. Or look at the trouble I've caused that person. Like not turning off my phone, obviously. So yes, I think it's wonderful. But the whole lot works together to really give you, I nearly forgot to introduce myself there because I got nervous. My whole thing is about personal power. Teaching people to discover their own sense of personal power. And I think what increases our sense of personal power is being able to manage our lives, right? And I started off working as a social worker about 30 years ago, and I started off working with people whose children were being taken into care. And these these parents were losing their children because they weren't managing their lives. And what were the social workers telling them to do? Get your act together. Most people cannot get their act together when there's a gun to their head. They just fall apart with the stress. And that was really where my journey, the last speaker that was here at the Galway, the guy was talking about Galway, he was amazing. He talked about his why. Well, my why was looking at, if you wanted to teach people to do better, they needed better skills. And you had to teach them those skills. And people seem to think just because you're an adult, you should be able to manage your life. Most of us as adults can't manage our lives. And somebody actually has to walk us step by step on how to do it. But that's my belief anyway. So I've investigated loads of ways to manage stress with the sense of, if I embrace my personal power, I'm going to feel better about myself and everything flows from that. Okay folks, thanks very much.